Review of Android 16. Earlier than usual. Although the main news here is that Google has seriously shaken up the logic of Android updates this year. And new chips, of course, were delivered. To begin with, when will your mobile phones receive the latest versions of Android now? On the iPhone, everything is simple. Once a year, there is a big update, a dozen intermediate ones with minor changes, although now even this does not seem to be the case. Because they smear the release of the same Apple Intelligence to 2020, it is unclear what. But that's not the point. What about Android? The logic here is actually about the same. There is one major update once a year. In our case, Android 16, and a smaller update. That's what they're called. A smaller update. Just kidding. They are called the quarterly release of the platform, or QPR. However, they are usually only seen by Pixel users, since they do not often reach other users of other brands. The fact that manufacturers simply broke into updating the system for each device 4 times a year. Security patches are also released every month that fix vulnerabilities in the operating system itself and in related components. Difficult. And I've just started this. And if the end is monolithic, then the Android is divided into a bunch of different parts. Patches 4, which arrive not once a month or once a year, but when necessary. And they arrive in Google Play. Therefore, if in the list of installed applications, you suddenly noticed some kind of muddy Android system Safetico, then nothing like that. This is a component of the system, not a virus. Or maybe a virus. No one prevents him from masquerading as a system component, right? It's an Android after all. But that's not the point now. Independent, but important applications like Google Chrome or Google Phone are also updated according to their schedule. And also through Google Play. This is not a Safari that has 3 updates per year when updating the apps itself. And I'm not talking about the Pixel, which also has its own jokes. It seems like the Pixel feature drop is an update package that usually comes out with a Q. And the difference is that QPR is available to all manufacturers, and the Pixel feature drop is exclusive for Google devices. So, usually a new version of Android comes out at the end of summer, in early autumn. And everything would be fine, but there is one plug: the flagships come out plus or minus at the same time. But manufacturers need to optimize the system for a new stone, and for a new smartphone as a whole. Therefore, often new flagships come out on the old Android. And okay, like some kind of Xiaomi, there's nothing visible behind the hyper. But Google Pixel 9 came out on Android 14, because Android 15 appeared only in October. The new flagship on the old operating system, it looks stupid. And finally, in order not to be so stupid, Google changed the release schedule of the platform, so the major release, that is, Android 16, will be released in June, a full-fledged one. And accordingly, the beta testing program is launched early. And we started testing it back in November. Secondly, Google thought about it and decided that there was not enough confusion, so we need to add more. In addition to the major version of the new Android, a larger version will be released at the end of the year than QPR, but smaller than a full-fledged release, a kind of Android 16.1. In total, the schedule in the 25th year turns out like this. In the first quarter, Android 15 QPR2, which has already been released. In the second quarter, stable Android 16. Then in the third quarter, we are waiting for Android 16 QPR1, and at the end of the year, Android 16.1. Plus monthly patches and the rest of the tinsel, which I was talking about above. No one cancelled it. So almost immediately after the release of Android 15 that year, Android 16 began to be tested. That is why the system does not say that it is replete with innovations, but there is something to look at. Just to get started, let's briefly run through QPR1 and QPR2. The first one was released in December, the second one recently, in early March. And not everyone has Google phones, so many of these chips will see only with the release of Android 16. As well as this integration. Everyone will see her for the first time. For those who don't rewind the integration, bonus content. In the March Google feature drop, an algorithm for detecting fraud in sums was delivered. Google has had the same feature for a long time, but on calls. And none of this works in Russia. And besides, our domestic scammers are much more dangerous and cunning. New schemes of deception are constantly appearing, even voices are already being forged. But security technologies also do not stand still. MTS has introduced the Defender Plus service with a whole range of chips for your digital security. The service has 3 levels of protection. If a spammer or a fraudster calls you, the Defender will pick up the phone for you, record the conversation, and send the transcript in the application. If at the moment of the conversation, the Defender realizes that there is a fraudster on the other side, then artificial intelligence will warn you about it, only you will hear the notification, so you can simply hang up without any questions. But even if the crooks still manage to deceive you, you will get your money back. You can connect Defender Plus to tariffs for 149 rubles a month, or even without additional payments. If you have a super MTS tariff, sounds like a great deal. Link to Defender Plus in the description. In stock Android 15 QPR1 Home settings, the Google account section was dragged up. Your name and avatar are now immediately displayed there, as on iOS and many third-party shells. The remaining items are grouped by meaning. It's clear, neat, but a little unusual. The internal menus remain the same. From the useful. If you are watching videos or playing in landscape mode, notifications are now displayed in one line. You can see the name of the sender and a small piece of the message. In general, it is more convenient, less distracting, and less accidental clicks on push buttons. Pixel owners will appreciate the ability to limit the maximum charging percentage to 80%. This is available in third-party shells, but now it is native in Android itself. Go to the battery settings to optimize charging. Why? Batteries don't like to be fully charged. So there is a chance to extend the service life. But the trick for smartphones that have Type-C with DisplayPort support, that is, they are able to display an image on the screen. In the settings of the connected devices, you can adjust the resolution and orientation of the image. Clearly touched under the desktop mode a la Samsung DeX, which Google has been sawing for 5 years and still won't finish. So far, you can only watch videos on the big screen, and that's it. In addition, not every smartphone has a DisplayPort mode. Among Google's, this is Pixel 8, 8 Pro and newer. Slightly redesigned, the button for switching keyboards. Not languages in one keyboard, but keyboards as a whole. The button looks like a globe icon next to the gesture bar at the bottom of the screen. A short press now switches the keyboard to the next one in the list, and a long press brings up a menu with all input methods. The menu itself was moved down and to the right. It's more convenient to reach out to right-handers this way. I'm sorry for the lefties, that is. Pixel tablet owners could also check out the new panel for placing widgets, which can be called with a swipe from the lock screen. Once, a long time ago, in prehistoric times, Android already allowed to put widgets on the lock screen. But with the release of Android Lollipop, the chip was removed, and now it has been returned, but in a truncated format. On smartphones, it is not yet possible to put widgets on a locked screen, but there are already hints of a combo in the Android 16 code. And there seems to be a small nuance, but which will still play in Android 16. If you start recording or broadcasting the screen, now a bright indicator with a countdown appears in the status bar. You can click on it and quickly stop recording. Previously, I had to climb into the quick settings panel. Let's move on. Android 15, QPR2 and Pixel feature drop. The most important change in the March update is that the Do Not Disturb mode has evolved into modes. Here you can create several schedules that will be activated on special events or manually, and change the notification and screen settings. This was partly the case before, but now the setup has become deeper. Similar to the logic of focusing modes in AVES, Do Not Disturb mode is now one of several modes. There is also a night mode, driving, gaming or fun, which is activated if you put your smartphone screen down. You can customize ready-made or create your own from scratch. There are theme and interface settings for each schedule, from whom to skip push and so on. We have embellished the code with the data of the current Wi-Fi point, now in the style of the material bio. If anyone did not know, through the settings, you can generate a code with a password from home Wi-Fi, so as not to force guests to enter a combination with handles. For developers, an interesting thing was delivered, an embedded Linux virtual machine with the Debian distribution. Android runs on a modified Linux kernel, so it's here without any special magic. But you can run desktop software and all that right on the device. To do this, we made a separate application. The terminal is enabled through the settings for developers. The Linux development environment item. Google has not yet enabled the possibility of launching a graphical interface. Well, it seems like they promised to fix it, especially since enthusiasts have already launched Doom through console mode. But Doom can be launched anywhere, even on a microwave oven, even in heaven. Finally brought to mind the function of reducing the volume of notifications, which was tested in the first beta Android 15. It works like this. If too many push buttons suddenly arrive on the smartphone in a short time, then Android will lower the volume for 2 minutes. The must-have is for those who do not disable notifications in group chats. Moreover, the setting does not affect the volume of calls and alarms. And Google also removed the beta mark for thematic icons. These are application icons on the desktop in the same style, which are still synchronized with the color of the current theme. The feature appeared back in Android 12, but the developers were not in too much of a hurry to implement it for their applications. Now, of course, the situation is better, but there are still hundreds of thousands of applications that have not been optimized. And what's the point? Even if 99% of the icons are beautiful, one will be knocked out. And a nice little detail, in the menu of Bluetooth devices in the curtain, real pictures of headphones and other accessories are now displayed instead of standard icons, just as it was already in the settings. It only works with devices that support the fast connection technology of Google FastP. There is a new clock widget, where you can select several timers at once and run them from the desktop. In the display settings, Google has added a separate menu for touchscreen diagnostics. The system itself will check if there are any jams and report. A lot of different little things related to artificial intelligence were brought into Pixels, but it works only in the USA, not here. For example, a scam detector when calling. That's what we talked about in integration. That is, MTS does it here, and Google does it there, but not in Russia. The Pixel Studio application has learned how to generate people. Pixel Screenshot has learned to offer to move screenshots to certain collections, depending on the content of the images. And both earned in German and Japanese, but not in Russian. And there are still no such applications in the Russian store. From interesting and working, there is support for third-party cameras to aim yourself from different angles. I repeat, strive. That is, you can connect a GoPro 10 or newer to a Pixel, or even any other Pixel starting from the 6th. The feature is enabled in the connected camera's item settings. And then just go to the supported application from the list and add a new device through the pop-up button. It is important that only one camera can be connected at a time, and if there are 2 Pixels on the devices, there should be one Google account. Pixel 9 Pro Fold has a 2-screen mode during video recording. The voice recorder app now automatically transfers and decrypts recordings from other devices, well, conditionally there, from a tablet to a phone. Now you can share geolocation in real time with your loved ones through the Find My Device app. Does not work for me. Well, that's it, Android 16 at last. We got to the 16th Android. Firstly, there is a new class of notifications called Life Updates, which can display the current status of a task. Conditionally, if earlier there was a food and taxi application that sent a bunch of notifications that the car was found. The car is approaching, please get out, you came, I am standing here, now it will all be well, as if in one line. We recall Life Activitis verses about the same thing, but it already works. Plus a cool integrated history with dynamic island. In terms of the fact that all these activity notifications are displayed on any screen inside the system. Google copied the chip cleanly. There will also be updated notifications with a progress bar, and even its own analog of dynamic island. Only the information is displayed not around the cutout for the selfie camera, but in a small label in the status bar. Remember about the screen recording indicator. Here Life Updates will be in the same style. I can't use my own example to show how it will look, because there are no compatible applications yet. But there is a demo video. For each application, it will be possible to manually cut off such notifications if suddenly there are geniuses who will learn how to push spam into these labels. There is also a feature that migrated from the Android 15 beta. You can finally normally connect to audio devices to one smartphone at once. However, there are serious limitations because both smartphones and both headsets must support Bluetooth audio, which includes Auracast technology, which in turn is responsible for the audio stream. But not that this is a rarity, because here's a Pixel Bang about 2, here the Aura of casts is supported. It will work on Pixel 8, 8 Pro and newer, but it will not, by the way, on Pixel 8. But for some reason. Maybe at 9 and it will be. They should have brought him in sooner. By the way, as soon as they arrive, we will do a battery battle test among compact Android smartphones. You've already looked at the first 2, and it is not necessary to write that in Xiaomi it is, that in Samsung it is, that it is, that in Plus it is, that in Huawei it is, that it is, that in Real it is, that in Motorola it is, that in Comf it is. Well, you understand. The system will also be able to ignore the restrictions on the screen prescribed in the code. But some applications now have black bars on the side. And like this problem will disappear. But all this is in the future, because there should be support for Android IP 16. And developers don't really like to turn all this on their application, and they have to wait 4 years. It's the same with the backward gesture, which has appeared for a long time, so beautiful when you swipe from the left side of the screen to the right, and you have the previous page. There is no such thing anywhere. But those applications that will support the API of the 16th Android, there will already automatically support the gesture back. And this adaptation of the screen. But the most important change in Android 16 is the appearance of 7 new and fashionable, the same as in 018.4. Hooray! There is also support for the Advanced Professional Video Codec, which Samsung is developing. Android now has, well, for those who want to shoot on a smartphone in professional quality, out of convenience for those who are not with us. In the gesture settings, you can now assign the launch of Google Wallet to double-click the power button. Now there is a default camera there. Google Wallet, if anything, is a new version of Google Pay, but in Russia, we did not have time to try this new application. And so it would be fun to open the world of Pay with this button. Although I don't know, Van loves camera. Google also tested a large redesign of the notification bar and quick settings. But judging by the fact that there is nothing left until the final release of Android 16, the redesign is apparently postponed until Android 17. The point is, now the notification panel and the quick settings panel are one, but in many shells. They are two different entities that open from two different angles, and it seems like Google wants to transfer this practice to iOS. The solution is questionable, but in a sense understandable. It's better to do like everyone else than retrain new users. But, judging by the prototypes, we could have returned the label size setting. Secondary icons could be flattened to take up half as much space. For labels in one line is a buzz. It was also reported about the ability to collapse any application into a floating mini window, such a prototype of a normal disk mode. The hidden mode was found in the first quarterly update of Android 15. And now, by sunset, Android 16 is already being tested, and there are still no chips. Among the Pixels, the update to Android 16 will receive all models on Tensor chips. And if you haven't heard yet, Google has been generous and just added 2 years of support for Pixel 6 and Pixel 7. That is, there used to be 3 years of Android updates, now there are 5. That is, Pixel 6 was supposed to end after updating to Android 15, but it will get as much as the 17th. Rejoice! And from the next beta Android 16, Google's partner companies will also get the opportunity to install Android 16. That is, Van Plus, Samsung, Xiaomi, maybe someone else. It's not clear yet. And the last thing I want to tell you about, Google is developing a new Pixelbook, thereby reviving the line. But not as it is done on the next Linux distribution, that is, on Chromos, but on Android. And, apparently, Android 16. And they say that the new Pixelbook will not just be a browser machine, but a full-fledged competitor to MacBook Pro, with millions of apps, oddly enough for Android. On the one hand, of course, a good book Yandex shop through a native application with a laptop, but on the other hand, is sort of sad to look at it all, because apparently Google will not be able to attract third-party developers to professional software Photoshop, After Effects, DaVinci was cutting and other tools. But we will see. Such a story.